Hello friends, welcome in or welcome back. I'm Hannah, and in today's video we are going to talk about all of the books that I read in July. This is getting up a little bit late because I wanted last week's video to be the vlog of me attending New York Stationery Fest, which was a blast. If you haven't had a chance to go check that video out yet, please do so. I show off a lot of bookstores in New York in addition to stationery shops. I did post a reel over on Instagram showing off all of the books I picked up while I was in New York City because in addition to all the stationery shops, I went to quite a few bookstores with my friends. It was a great time. I really enjoyed it. And now I have even more that I need to read in the coming months. But for today, let's talk about everything that I read in July. I want to start the month off with something really fun and lighthearted. We had the 4th of July. I really wanted like a good summery read for that weekend because I was just kind of hanging out at home. I decided to pick up Beach Read by Emily Henry. This was my first experience with an Emily Henry book. I actually got this from a friend at a book swap. A lot of my friends love her. I know a lot of people in romance, just readers in general, love her. So I was really intrigued to finally get into her work. This one is set actually on a lake. Despite being called Beach Read, it is set at a lake. You were following January and Augustus. They are both writers. January is a romance writer, a rather successful one, and Augustus writes more literary fiction. They know each other, they have a past, but they've not seen each other for many years. And January, at the start of the book, has been dealing with some family trauma, some loss, and she has not been able to write lately, and she is on a deadline. So she heads to this lake house that she inherited to go spend some time alone and try to get this book written. Of course, when she gets there, she finds Augustus there at another house, and they quickly both discover that they both are suffering from writer's block and neither can really figure out how to get past it. They decide that they are going to form a little pact, a little agreement for the summer. They are going to write in each other's preferred genre, and hopefully that'll help them both get out of this rut that they are in. And of course, they're going to fall in love while all of this plays out. Overall, I really enjoyed this. I do really like the way that Emily Henry writes characters. I think she does a really good job of taking them beyond the romance. I think one of the things I've been frustrated with the romances that I've been reading lately is it feels very focused on the romance, but the characters don't feel very complex beyond that. And I think what Emily Henry does well is give them a lot of depth. I do like the romance here. I liked the characters. I liked how they came together. I felt like the pacing was really good. And I really liked the way that their stories kind of unfolded. I do wish that there were more secondary characters that felt a little bit deeper. Like, this is very much a book focused on our two protagonists, and they have these side characters that come in, but they just felt a little flat, almost one-dimensional compared to our protagonists. I also felt like a few of the plot lines weren't totally resolved by the end of the book, or maybe I just wasn't happy with how they resolved. You know, January is dealing with family news. She's found out, and this is not a spoiler because it's at the very beginning of the book, she found out that her father, who has passed away, and she's dealing with this grief, he was also not faithful to her mother. And how January is dealing with all of this is she's struggling with it. And her relationship with her mother is affected by this because of the way her mother reacted to this information. So the relationship between January and her mother I thought was really interesting, but I feel like we get a lot of January's side of it, but I almost wanted more from the where that plot line accumulates, where that the climax of it just felt a little flat in my opinion. Overall, I enjoyed this. Do I feel like I need to pick up another Emily Henry right away? Probably not, but I feel like if I ever had a chance to get one, at the library or something, it might be a fun summer read. So yeah, I thought this was actually a really great way to spend the 4th of July though, because there is a 4th of July scene in here. So it was good timing, I would say. Next book I picked up in July was a nonfiction, and nonfiction is something that I've been meaning to read more of this year, and I just haven't found myself gravitating towards. Really hoping to fix that over the next few months, but this month I read Monsters, A Fan's Dilemma by Claire Dederer. I had the opportunity to hear this author speak about her book a year or two back now at an event at Women and Children First here in Chicago, and it was a really interesting discussion. The main question that this book asks is, what do we do with the art of monstrous men? It opens up talking about Woody Allen and Roman Polanski. Both are men who have done terrible things to women and to other people in their lives. Throughout all of this book, all of the figures that are touched upon in this book, so many of them are the creators of artworks and books and movies and things that many of us still love. I mean, I can be the first to say that I don't like Woody Allen. I've never liked him as a person. I don't really like most of his movies, but I do love Midnight in Paris And this book goes on to ask, if you love something by somebody who did something horrible, are you a horrible person? How are you supposed to deal with those feelings? And I think the takeaway from this it's not going to answer that question. It's not going to tell you how to feel. It's not going to tell you if you're right or you're wrong, because I don't think you can answer that question. That's all subjective to the individual. But I think it does remind you that you are not alone in those feelings and in those thoughts. This examines people from Woody Allen and Roman Polanski. It touches on present day figures like J.K. Rowling. It spends a chapter talking about people who we consider geniuses, who we seem to really excuse the monstrous acts of, like Pablo Picasso and Ernest Hemingway. And there's just all sorts of other acts that go through this. Michael Jackson is touched upon. And I think it was just a really interesting deep dive into all of these people, and made me kind of really think a little more deeply about how I interact with the work of monstrous people. One of my favorite chapters in here is actually talking about Vladimir Nabokov, who wrote Lolita, and the impact that writing a absolutely monstrous work that features a horrible main character, the impact that it had on him as a person, when there has never been any evidence to show that Nabokov had any tendencies towards the main character in Lolita. So there's a lot of interesting discussions and analyses here. I do feel like I walked away from this book, like I said, just being reminded of the fact that all of us are dealing with these feelings, and there is no, I don't think, any correct answer for how you engage with all of this work. So yeah, this was really interesting. I would recommend it if you were a big pop culture person and big into the arts and stuff. I did think this was a really enjoyable read, and I think it's a really good one for like a book club discussion. One of my non-reading goals for this year was actually to get through the Studio Ghibli movies that I have not seen, and I've only seen a few of them. One of the films that I have not seen yet is Kiki's Delivery Service, but I also wanted to read the book that inspired the film. So I did do that before I watched the movie, and spoiler alert, these are very different. The film adaptation is quite different from this book. This is written by Eiko Kadono, and this is such a cute little middle grade book. This is the Fairy Loot Special Edition, which I picked up I think last year, and it's just absolutely beautiful. It's got this really pretty sprayed edge with Kiki. And this is following a witch who, on her 13th birthday, she goes off to find the town that she is going to live in, where she is going to help the town. Every town needs a witch, and she has to go find her home. And so she, along with her black cat, head off to find this place. And then it's about her settling into this little village and all of the people she meets and the quests she goes on as she starts her new delivery service business. This is very cute. It's very sweet. This is the type of thing you can sit down and read in an hour or two. I do recommend reading it. If you have seen the movie, I would recommend reading it. Just know it's a very different adaptation. But I also think that I would, if you want a more adult coming of age story, I would argue that's what the film does. This is a little bit sweeter, a little bit softer. I thought this was absolutely adorable. I don't have too much to say about it because it is a middle grade book. It is very much just kind of a whimsical, each chapter is Kiki going on a little mini adventure and the people she meets along the way. It's very sweet though. It's the perfect way to spend an afternoon. And I really enjoyed my time with it. I'm so excited to talk about the next book that I finished in July, because this one was one of 2 5-star reads that I had this month. This book in particular, it's the first book in a quartet, has been sitting on my shelf for such a long time, and I was really put off of it by it for quite a while because I didn't love the cover art. But once I opened my mind to the logic behind the designer's decisions, I finally convinced myself to pick it up, and I'm so glad I did, because this is probably one of my top 5 books of the year so far. Of course, I'm talking about My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. This is the first book in the Neapolitan Quartet. I cannot begin to tell you how much I loved this book. This is a story about 2 girls growing up in Italy in the 1950s and the friendship that carries them through the years. Our narrator is Elena, and she and Lila are 2 girls who, they grew up in a more working class neighborhood, and they have this friendship that truly is just so raw and beautiful. And I think something that so many of us can connect to. This is a coming of age story. It's a story about, you see Elena dealing with feelings of jealousy and not wanting to be left behind by her friend and wanting to impress her friend. And it's just such an interesting deep dive that you almost are questioning, because Elena is the narrator. It's a first person story. And so you always are kind of wondering how reliable she is. But it is a beautiful book, and the connection between these two girls is so utterly real. It's just so raw and at times toxic, but I just could not stop reading it. I feel like this quartet is probably going to go down as one of my favorite series ever, which is not, a radical statement. So many people love this. And I cannot wait to dive into the next book. I already got the second one. I'm really hoping to maybe get to it this month, just because I feel like this is such a summery series, because being set in Italy, so many of the descriptions in this book have that like very hot, heavy summer feel. A lot of this takes place out on the water, of them talking about their summer vacations. So it is very much a summer read, but I loved this so much. I cannot wait to read more by Elena Ferrante in general. This was my first time reading the author at all, but I can already tell you that I will be reading everything on her backlog and looking forward to anything else that she may publish. The next book I finished was actually a library pickup, and this was one that I just picked up on a whim, and I had a good time with it. This is Over the Woodward Wall by Deborah Baker, which is the first book in a 4-book novella series, which I think is middle grade. It was shelved as adult, but I'm pretty sure it's like a middle grade series. In this, you are following Avery and Zib. They are 2 children who live in this town, and they live very different lives. Zib is the daughter of kind of more bohemian type parents. She's very creative. She's kind of allowed to do whatever she wants. And Avery, he lives in a house where everything's very clean, very organized. His parents are very, by the books. He likes rules, he likes structure. And these 2 children both end up on the same day going on a detour, and they find themselves over a wall in this mysterious forest. And from there, it's really kind of an Alice in Wonderland tale of these 2 children falling down a rabbit hole of this world as they're trying to get home. It's a very cute book. I truly feel like it is almost an Alice in Wonderland retelling, with the way that some of the plot points work and some of the characters work. There's a lot of wordplay. There's a lot of puns and riddles. It has just a lot of, there's a lot of imagery and whimsy to it. It is 4 books in a series. I don't know how quickly I'll pick up the other 3, but they are very short because they are novellas. I feel like this was a really fun one, even as an adult to read. It did, harken back to something that I would have picked up when I was, a preteen, probably. And the cover art is stunning. So love this cover art. That was what made me pick it up in the first place. Very fun, very interesting, but don't know how quickly I'll be picking up the rest. Now we get to talk about the big one, the other 5-star read of the month, and the book that I have been trying to get through since December. And finally, we finished it in July. I am, of course, talking about Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. This is my first time reading this book, and I loved it. Despite the fact that it took me 7-8 months to read, I loved this book so much. This is probably one of my top 3 classics of all time already. This is my first foray into Tolstoy. I would like to read War and Peace and everything else that he's ever written. I really want to get into more of the Russian classics in general, because I've never really dove into any of them. And I'm really glad I started with the Anna Karenina. Despite the fact that this book is 800 some plus pages, I feel like this is a very readable classic. The language is so accessible, and I feel like the characters and their storylines also feel very easy to relate to. Despite the book being titled Anna Karenina, Anna is one of really 4 main characters that we follow over the course of this book. Anna is married to Karenin, and she has a son, but she is very unhappy in her marriage. And one day she meets the Count Vronsky, and Vronsky is this kind of soldier. He's free, and he's I think he's a bit younger than her, and he just has this like spirit to him, and she's immediately captivated. But Vronsky was courting a girl named Kitty, and Kitty and Anna have family ties, and there's just all of these kind of layers and complexities between all these characters tied together. There's a man named Levin who is in love with Kitty, and Kitty is in love with Vronsky, and there's like these triangles and everything. And I talk about romance like it's the main core of the book, and it is important to it, but more so than that, this is really a story that goes deeper. This is a look at Russian culture at the time. It is a look at the way that we connect with each other. There's a look at humanity, what makes us good, what makes us evil. What is happiness? You know, there's examinations of religion in here and our connection to nature and to farmland and to farming and to all these things. There's so much to this book that I feel like I could never begin to capture in a 2 or 3 minute review. But I will say I loved it. I think Anna is a very interesting character. She's a very sympathetic character, I would argue, despite the fact that I think at times she is kind of set up to be the villain of the story in some ways. But by the end of the book, I just found myself feeling sympathy for her because she is very clearly a victim of the time in which she lives. I loved this. I loved the characters. I loved Kitty. I loved Vronsky. And I even loved Vronsky. I didn't love Vronsky for a long time, but I warmed up to him. Levin is very interesting. I will say, anybody who has heard about Anna Karenina knows how much farming is in this. There's a lot of farming. You are going to have lots of chapters that is just talking about farming, so be prepared for that. But I loved this. You can see I did a lot of annotating and note-taking in here, and I feel like this is a book that I will definitely want to revisit again one day. So yeah, I loved this so much. In a completely different vein, the next book that I picked up was a cozy fantasy that had been sitting on my shelf for a while, but I needed to read this for one of the challenges that I'm doing this year in my reading journal. This is A Fellowship of Bakers and Magic by J. Penner. This is the first book in the Adenashire series. I picked this up, I think, last year, maybe on like Romance Bookstore Day. I loved the cover art. I think it's beautiful. It's got a really beautiful sprayed edge color. And I really had high hopes for this. I thought it was going to be just kind of a cute, fun little story. In this, we're following our main character, Arletta. She is a baker, and she's a human baker, and she lives in this world where everybody but humans have some type of magic, and she is seen as kind of lesser because she has no magic. And she is then invited to partake in this illustrious baking contest in the capital, and she goes off to try to prove to herself and everybody else that she can bake just as well as somebody with magic. Unfortunately, that's about as much as the story that I really enjoyed. I loved the setup of it, and I feel like there was a lot of hope here, but I think at the end of the day, this was just way too cozy for me. I didn't really believe in the romance that was being pitched between Arletta. There's an elf that makes an appearance that there's very clearly a romantic angle being pitched right away. It just felt like there was so much this book was trying to do and not enough pages to do it and not enough depth to do it. Every time there was any type of like conflict or something interesting, we very quickly brushed over it. I think we had to hit like 3 dozen tropes, and it just felt very simplistic and shallow. And I don't feel like cozy fantasy is always that. I've read really great cozy fantasy that has depth and complexity, but still has lower stakes. So yeah, this just didn't really work for me. I think there's like 7 or 8 books in this series, and I can't be bothered. I wish I liked this more because I did love the idea of like a magical baking contest. I thought that was really fun and cute, but the execution didn't work. I found Arletta to be a little bit of a weak protagonist, and her like self-confidence, that whole angle, it just didn't quite stick for me. It just didn't work. So yeah, unfortunately this one was not for me, and I don't think I'll be returning to this world anymore. The last book that I read in July was a book that I picked up earlier this summer on a whim, and I'm so glad I did because this really was probably one of my favorite reads of the summer, despite it not being a 5-star for me. I'm talking about 3 Summers by Margarita Liberaki. This was translated from the Greek by Karen Van Dyke. This is a New York Review Books edition, which I love these editions. They're like perfectly like hand-sized. There's something I love about that, and the paper quality is so nice. This, I believe, is considered kind of a Greek classic. I think a lot of Greek schools teach this book in their classrooms, and I can see why. This book follows 3 sisters over the course of 3 summers right before World War II, just outside Athens. We have Maria, who is the eldest. She's kind of a little bit more of a wild child. Infanta, who's the middle sister, who has a very deep relationship with her aunt and who is a little bit quiet and more reserved, a little mysterious. And then Katerina, our narrator, who is young and dreaming of, grandeur and romance. And you are examining them and their relationship with each other and the people around them and who they fall in love with and their connections with others. And this is just a really beautiful story kind of told in vignettes. Katerina is such an interesting narrator because she has this spirit to her and this energy, but she still is 16 at the start of the book. So you get kind of the teenage drama, which I think works so well for what this story was trying to do. I think of all the sisters, Infanta was the one that I was most drawn to because her storyline is so interesting her relationship with her aunt truly plays a huge influence over some of the decisions that she makes. And I felt like through the whole book, I was just following her along, wanting to really get inside her head and really understand what was going on and why she was doing the things that she did. I just found this to be really beautiful. I think this is a perfect summer read. Again, it's got that hot, sticky feeling. It's like perfect to go lay out in the sun and just read in a couple sittings. The language is beautiful. There were lines in here that I was thinking about long after I finished the book. And the way that this ends was not totally what I expected, but I think it's a really, really solid ending to this book. So yeah, I believe this author wrote a few more titles. I think she has 2 other novels out. I don't know if they've been translated to English, but I do want to look into them because I really liked the flow of this and the story. I'm a sucker for anything where it's like coming of age, you know, kind of slice of life stories examining just like a period in time in somebody's life. So yeah, loved this. Really, really glad that I picked this up on a whim because I hadn't really even heard of this before. And absolutely will be picking up the author's other work. So that is everything that I read in July. I would love to hear what you guys have read, and if you read anything that I did and have any thoughts. I am very excited about my August reads. I'm trying to get back into the flow of it after going on my little trip. I always find it hard to get back into reading after traveling. Like I read a lot when I travel, and then I come back and I feel like I'm kind of burned out on it. So we're getting back into the groove though. I've already finished a few books this month, and I'm really looking forward to some of the other stuff that I have on my shelf ahead of me. So if you enjoyed this book, please give a like and subscribe. I would love to see you guys come down in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.